Last race weekend of our triple header, we make it to one of Formula One's most special tracks, the British Grand Prix. This GP has been around literally since forever for Formula One. Probably has the most iconic reputation and has some of the most insane and craziest moments. Going back all the way to 1991, one of the most iconic pictures that we have and moments in our sport from the rivalry happening at that time between Williams and McLaren with Senna and Mansell. Senna's car gave out literally the lap before the finish, and Mansell picked him up on his victory lap, and we got this beautiful, iconic picture. This GP in 1998 gave us one of the most iconic Michael Schumacher victories where he won it from the pit lane, which nowadays we would call a smooth operation. Knowing they had a stop and go penalty, they waited all the way till the end of the race to serve the penalty after crossing the start-finish line. McLaren tried actually appealing this decision after, but it stood and Michael won through brilliant strategy. The guy that's been victorious here 8 times, the dominant force Lewis Hamilton, had probably his greatest victory, if not in his career, in 2008 here at the British GP. He fended off Kimi Räikkönen early, but then went into what we see now a Max Verstappen mode, and made a gap so big that the only drivers that weren't lapped by him were the top 3. A literal masterclass performance. This then also leads us into another crazy Lewis Hamilton victory. This will be a common trend here considering this is the GP he is tied with Michael Schumacher on. In 2020, he won the race on a punctured tire. It was like a 30-second difference between Lewis and Max in the very last lap, but to win it on 3 tires was pretty insane and gave us some of the best pictures we've ever seen of a Formula One car in motion. This GP also holds probably one of the most iconic collisions between Max and Lewis in 2021, where Max hit up to 51 Gs in Copse Corner after a crazy collision. Thankfully we still have the Lion around, but this was a very intense crash and it kind of decided how the rest of 2021 was going to go. In 2022, pretty much the whole GP was iconic. Sainz got his first victory. He ended up actually getting a pole position in this weekend as well. It was a rainy weekend. Even Nicholas Latifi finished in the top 10 in this week, at least in qualifying. We got the iconic through goes Hamilton, Carlos telling the Ferrari team to stop inventing for Leclerc to get through. It really delivered, and this GP constantly does that. As I said, Lewis Hamilton is the dominant force here. He's won the race 8 times, he's been on pole position 7 times, and a podium 12 times. To do this at your home Grand Prix is quite impressive. We do actually have some pretty nice liveries coming here. Talking about the Williams, they have the Union Jack on there. I love the way this looks. I think it's very fitting for the Williams team to represent their home country like this, especially at this GP. Last year they had it in white. I do like the way that it looks better this year than it did last year. Last year was still great, but this year it was good. And they had a great car last year, so hopefully that can continue into 2024. Red Bull is also bringing a livery. Here's a detailed image of what we think is going to look like. They showed off a little bit of red paint being put onto it. It's either paint or it's the war paint after the crazy Austrian GP between Lando and Max. I do like the look of this. The car honestly could have any livery on it. The shape of this car is amazing. I can't believe that I didn't think the shape of this car wasn't that great in the beginning of the year. This GP is a very particular one. We're going to go with the hardest tires here from C1 to C3. The traction is going to be at a 3, tire stress is a 5, if not the hardest track on tires during our whole entire calendar year. The asphalt grip here is going to be a 4 out of 5, so in qualifying, waiting till the last second to put in those laps is very important as track evolution is very big here. Braking isn't that hard here. You're on full throttle for a lot of the lap. And they do say downforce is a 4 out of 5 looking at this report, but to be honest, that's not what we're going to see. With it being a full throttle lap and a lot of straight line, we can expect medium downforce from every single team here because they need the straight line speed. It's very important to actually be able to overtake on this track and make that gap. And that's where more of the tire stress even comes out of because they don't go with super high downforce. Even with the tire stress being super high, sometimes Pirelli recommends a 2-stop strategy. That typically doesn't happen here. It usually ends up being a 1-stop. In 2023, we saw Verstappen, Norris, and Hamilton all have pretty much the same strategy. Lando had a hard at the end of the race. It actually seemed to be the best decision, almost catching Max by the end in a car that was definitely worse in that year. It takes a long time to make the pit because it is a slow kilometer speed going in there, the pit limiter at least. So most teams only go for that 1-stop just because it is a very long pit stop. A lot of safety cars happen here. That's why we typically get a very good race. It's not a lot of overtaking, but it's always fun and very interesting to see what will happen here at the British GP. Let's go over a lap in Silverstone. Starting the lap at the start-finish line, it's not a huge run into turn 1, but this is flat out in qualifying. In the race at the start on full fuel, especially if they're going to go wheel to wheel into this corner, we probably will see a lift. We saw Guan Yu Zhou have a big crash into this corner. It's happened more times than not that this first corner can provide some pretty big crashes. We then go into turn 2, which is full throttle as well. Turn 3 is the start of hard braking zones in this sector 1. A very tricky corner to nail, but when you get it, it gives a good amount of lap time. Then you go into 4, where the cars usually have a lot of understeer, so drivers will try and switch up their settings to go into this corner. And then 4 leads into 5, which is usually full throttle going out of 4 into a big straight with a DRS zone. We do see overtakes here happen pretty often if the car is close. We then start off sector 2 going into turn 6, another tricky corner, but a medium speed corner. It's not too hard of a braking zone. Turn 7 is slow to medium speedish. Depending on the tire strategy, we can see overtakes here. They're usually beautiful if they are done. And that leads us into turn 8, which is flat out. We get into turn 9, which is iconic to this GP, called Cops Corner, and has given us that iconic moment between Max and Lewis, a season-defining moment, which then leads into Maggots and Beckett's. This is one of the only tracks that I know the corner name is for just because of how iconic it is. This section is made up of turns 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. 11 and 12 start off in full throttle. You will have to downshift going into 13 to nail 14, which is another straight in a DRS zone where we will see overtakes. This starts off a short sector 3. It's that straight going into turn 15, which can be a tricky corner to nail. Understeer tends to be a problem here as well, and this is where the tires start to flare up during your lap. Then that leads into a straight going into a super hard braking zone into turn 16 and 17, where you want to compromise the entry into 16 to nail the exit out of 17 to get the perfect finish on the lap into turn 18, going down to that start-finish line. A beautiful track layout. It gives us great laps in qualifying, but it gives us even better racing. Let's go over my predictions for the GP. So as we always do, the best teams, worst teams, and my top 5. For the best teams, I'm gonna make this a little bit different. Checo's been very behind, so when I'm talking about teams, I'm gonna talk about Max, because Max is the Red Bull team as of right now. It's gonna be close. Considering it was close even in 2023 when the RB19 was the best car, I expect it to be close again between McLaren, who's improved a lot. I'm going to say the McLaren car has proven to me that no matter what track you put it on, just because of that tire advantage at the end, they are P1 for me. So I will have McLaren at number 1. I'm going to have Max's car in number 2. Max as a driver, I still think is the best driver on the grid, but he is driving a car that's slower than the McLaren. They will have big upgrades here. I talked about it. It's going to be a big package, so let's see if that can actually propel them now to be the actual best car in P1 to be competitive with McLaren no matter the track, because it seems to be track dependent now if the Red Bull can actually take that advantage. It does seem to have the pace, but it's its tires that fall off way quicker than the McLaren. And in P3, I'm going to have Ferrari and Mercedes tied. I typically haven't done this, but I don't think there's any difference between them. And if you ask me right now, I think all of these teams can win the GP. It's going to be super close considering Lewis is insane here. George is shown to be very good here as well. Max has a good track record here. Leclerc has a great track record here. Sainz won the race in 2022. Lando has been outstanding. I mean, I can say so many good things about so many good drivers, and it's going to be so close. We really could have the 4 top teams here all fight for victory. I hope that's how it plays out, and the strategy is all pretty similar, so it's super close. I hope that's what we get here. As for the worst teams, gonna throw in Sauber in P10. Sadly, the team isn't improving a lot. They haven't brought a lot of upgrades yet either, so I'm not sure what they're doing. Hopefully something comes here. And this is where it gets tricky. Aston Martin is actually probably one of the teams gonna be in the worst teams. RB could be thrown in there just because of the type of track that it is. I think Haas is going to have a good GP considering the DRS zones, a lot of full throttle. That's when the car really excels. Maybe turn 7 will be trouble for the Haas. That's going to be trouble for a team like Aston Martin. I know it was last year. We're going to see that from RB as well. A lot of teams that suffer with understeer will not have a great time in Sector 2. It's got your Maggots and Beckett's, and that turn 7 is very tricky. And turn 6 is a long corner as well, so these teams will suffer and probably be a good margin behind. With that being said, I'm going to throw a curveball here and say that Williams is going to have a better GP than we expect, especially in the hands of Alex Albon. I'm going to say in P9, even with that being said, Williams is just that slightest bit slower. And then I'm going to say in P8 tied is going to be RB and Aston Martin. It pains me to say this for those teams, but I just think they're really far behind. They need to improve upon the package they had. It was a better Austria for RB, but this GP has some of those characteristics that Spain had, and they were very far behind. But let's talk about my top 5 drivers for the GP. As I said, it's going to be very close between the top 4, so this is very interchangeable. Starting from P5, I'm going to put in George Russell. Yep, after a victory, I still think he's going to be in the top 5. I don't think he's going to contend for the podium to win. He could. I think it's going to be very close between these drivers, but I think out of the 8 drivers that we have, P5 is kind of where I can see George finishing for this race. In P4, I think we're going to see Carlos Sainz. The Ferrari will improve here, and I think Carlos has a good track record on Silverstone. And the car, I think, will be better suited here considering how flat it is. Now, P3 to P1, it's difficult to say who can be in these. It's going to require somebody either to not perform well in the race, bad luck on their side. But here's what I'll say. I think in P3, we're going to get Lando. I think in P2, we're going to get Max. And I think Lewis is going to win here. This goes off of if the Mercedes package works really well. I do think they have a chance. I do think Max is going to have some vengeance here as well, considering what happened in Austria. It's going to be very close. It can go a lot of ways. I'm just going to throw out the prediction that I think Lewis has the possibility to win here. It's been a long time. It would be well deserved to see Lewis finally get a victory, especially at his home GP in his last year with Mercedes. So I'm going to throw it out there. Mercedes has a chance. P1 for Lewis. I think Leclerc is not going to have a great race again. It just seems like the team has been off. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe even he comes in for a victory. That's the beauty of these predictions. That's what I'm throwing out here. Lewis for victory. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Throw it out there. It's going to be close. These top 4 will all be right there. And I genuinely think they can all win. Leave them down in the comments. You know I'll reply. Thank you so much for the support on the channel. Please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world. And peace.